Hey, what is up guys? This is Nessie from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. This week has definitely been a little bit slower in terms of movement on the market. We haven't really had any big news or releases this past week, aside from the pretty significant ban list that just dropped over in the OCG. We're going to talk about a couple of smaller movements that I've noticed happening over the last couple of weeks though, things that have maybe slipped under your radar. Before we get started though, I do want to mention a couple of things. One, we are going to be having a holiday season sale over at MSTmerch.com. We'll have discounts on a bunch of our more popular items over there, so make sure that you guys check that out. The sale should be launching on Monday. And number two, later this week, Tombox is going to be posting up his top tier timeline and product review for 2022. Those are usually two of the more popular videos each year, so make sure that you guys subscribe and check that out later. And yeah, let's jump into the cards. Alright, so kicking things off, let's talk about Ancient Fairy Dragon, a card that was freshly unbanned over in the OCG. Now this card did see a small errata where instead of just destroying a field spell, you have to destroy as many as possible on the field before getting your search. But its effect to special summon a level 4 or lower monster from your hand once per turn remains the same. So overall, I think that Ancient Fairy Dragon fits pretty well into today's game with its ability to extend and get a body onto the board, as well as search for a field spell, especially with so many good field spells in the game nowadays. But of course, it depends on what decks can actually make level 7 synchros. There aren't really many that I could think of right now, unless you're counting like teching a Destrudo into Tearlaments, something like that. But right now, there's definitely a lot of early hype surrounding the card. I'm filming this a day early, so the prices might have changed already, but for now, I'm looking at $100 copies for the Ultimate Rare versions, $30 for the Secret Rares, and then you have like $5 to $10 for either of the Ultra Rare printings from Legendary Collection 5Ds or the Kaiba Collection Ultra Rares. Although we see hype like this fairly often because we're expecting the card to now be unbanned here in the TCG, I don't think that you guys should be chasing after this card too hard. With the errata, Ancient Fairy Dragon will definitely see a reprint in the TCG with its corrected text close to its unbanning. And that reprint will make the card much more accessible for everyone. So don't freak out and think that you need to grab a copy now. Rather, take advantage of the hype and offload any copies of the card that you have so that you can buy it back later on, especially since the hype will likely die down if people can't find a top tier deck to abuse this card in. Next up, let's take a look at Danger Nessie. So this is a danger card that is basically one of the more important pieces of the deck. It has the standard danger effect to summon and draw, but if it's discarded, you get to search for another danger monster, which basically means that you get to re-roll. Of course, this card is great for the Dark World strategy, giving you multiple chances to potentially discard Dark World monsters from your hand in order to proc their effects. Now, although Dark Worlds aren't necessarily a top tier deck right now, they're cheap and easy to build and actually pretty fun, so there's a lot of people looking to build them. Nessie is a necessary 3 of for the deck, and with so many people playing Dark Worlds, it's definitely a card that people are looking to pick up. This card was previously limited to 1, but went to 3 on the February 2022 ban list, and back then, the card was initially hyped up, but it didn't see too much play in the beginning. It did see some play early on in Tearlament builds, and saw a bit of hype there, but when the Ishizu stuff came out, it kind of fell off, but now it's back up once again with the Dark World cards. So oddly enough, in the Dark World structure deck, they reprinted Tsuchinoko, Bigfoot, Thunderbird, and Mothman, but not Nessie. And because of this, Nessies have jumped back up in price. The Secret Rares are actually fairly tame at around $30 each. For the Ultras, right, these were at $12 back when Tearlaments was playing them. They had fallen back down to $5 or $6, but they are now back up to $15 each. And then even for the Gold Rares, right, they were at $8. They'd fallen back down to like $3, really cheap, but now they are back up once again to $10 each. I think that this really says a lot about how many players are jumping on the Dark World train with how easy it is to access the rest of the strategy. I hope that they reprint Nessie soon, because if they don't, we should expect all these copies of Nessie to remain in the double digits because of the Dark World structure deck's popularity. Next, we have Muckraker from the Underworld. This is a generic Link 2 monster with a pretty simple effect. It has a protection effect where if a monster you control would be destroyed, you contribute a fiend monster instead. More importantly, its second effect lets you revive a fiend monster from your graveyard by discarding a card from your hand, but the discard is a part of the effect and not a cost. So this means that you don't discard if your opponent tries to hit this with an effect Veiler or an infinite impermanence, and it also means that this discard will proc the ability of a Dark World monster that is discarded. This is of course great for the Dark World deck, providing you with access to an easily accessible discard outlet in your extra deck. Now, if you guys remember, when Darkwing Blast first came out, we did talk about this card as being one that could potentially go up with the release of the Dark World structure deck, and it has actually done that. The ultra rares from the sneak peek are still relatively expensive at just over $15 a piece, but with the secret rares they were only $4 to $5 for a while, but over the last few weeks we've seen this card now double in price up to $10. Now, much like what we saw with Nessie, this definitely speaks to how many people are looking to play Dark Worlds with how easily accessible the entire core is. The card is still fairly cheap now, so if you want to play Dark Worlds, I think it's fine to just go ahead and grab your copy or two of this card. I wouldn't grab more than you need though, because I don't really see this card having very much application outside of the Dark World strategy, so as the hype for Dark Worlds goes down over the next couple of months, so too should this card's price. One other Link monster that is definitely worth noting right now is Saryuja Skull Dread. So yes, this is another Link monster that is seeing some play in the Dark World extra deck. It has two useful effects there if you use 4 materials to make it. It can special summon any monster from your hand for free, and it can let you draw 4 cards and put 3 back to the bottom of your deck. So I'm not too sure of like how many of you guys remember this, but this card was actually a very important card a couple of years ago in a couple of different decks. It was used in the Dark World FTK with Cannon Soldier, and it was also used with that slash draw deck where you would use this card to keep track of how many cards deep into your deck slash draw was so that you could FTK your opponent. So personally, I always thought that this card should be limited. I remember seeing this card used by so many people for like different loops and deep draws and stuff like that. It just seemed kind of crazy, but we actually went for a very long time without seeing this card in any competitive capacity at all. Now, however, of course, Dark Worlds are using this card since they can draw into danger monsters, put back their search targets, and then just draw them again anyways. And actually, special summoning a Dark World for free from your hand isn't that bad when you can bounce it back for Rainbow and then Grapha, and now you've gotten like multiple free cards out of it. So with Saryuja, we actually have a few different printings. The ultra rares are from Dual Devastator. Those are the most recent printing. They're actually up a bit. They were $1 or so. They're now around $3 a piece. The card, of course, also has its original Extreme Force and then Megaton secret rare printings. Now, somehow each of these printings is around like the $5 to $10 range, depending on if you're looking at the original or the reprint and the first ed or the unlimited. This kind of did catch me off guard a little bit. I thought that the original print secret rares would be considerably higher than the other printings, but the original print secret rares are only around $10. I think it's definitely worth noting and keeping an eye on this card, especially if there's a chance that another deck is able to abuse Saryuja in the future. Next, this is a pretty cool one. It's Sky Striker Airspace Area 0. I know I feel like we see Sky Striker buyouts every couple of months because for whatever reason, Konami just loves giving this archetype support. We just got Linkage and those 2 new monsters in Magnificent Mavens, and now next year we are getting Azalea and an alternate art Engage. With all of the stuff coming out, people are generally looking at whatever cards from the theme are necessary for the deck to function, yet haven't been reprinted in a while, and they try to buy those cards out on the assumption that people will need to pick up the card in order to play with the new upcoming support. So it just so happens that this time we had Area 0 slowly disappearing from the market. Area 0 was last reprinted in the 2019 Megaton, so a few years ago now, and while we did see Engage, Widow Anchor, Zeke, Shark Cannon, and other cards reprinted in Mavens, Area 0 is one of the few cards that wasn't reprinted and actually hasn't been reprinted in a few years. Because of this, we are seeing people look for Area 0s, and both printings are starting to move upwards in price. The original super rares from Dark Saviors are around $3 to $4 right now, not too bad, but the surprising one is that the commons from the 2019 Megatons are also around the same price, which is just kind of like weird to me. I remember setting aside like a few copies when I opened those Megatons, right? But I just had so many of them that I left a bunch of them in bulk that I offloaded at the time, and now I kind of regret it. But anyways, I figured that this is a card that everyone should know about, especially given how popular the Sky Striker strategy is despite not really being that great right now. I do think it's worth digging through your bulk to see if you have a few copies of this card, if you know you have some lying around somewhere, since you can offload them for a few dollars each. Alright, here's a somewhat interesting one, Blue Eyes Jet Dragon. So this is a card that came out back in Battle of Chaos as a secret rare, and of course, as Blue Eyes support, it was bound to be a fairly popular card. This card is actually kinda like nuts though. While it's on the field, other cards cannot be destroyed by card effects. Also, if you have a Blue Eyes on your field or in your graveyard, it gets two other really cool effects. If a card is destroyed at all, not just yours, it could be your opponent's, you get to special summon this card from your hand or graveyard, and then if this card battles, you can also target an opponent's card and bounce it back to their hand. All of this is on a 3000 attack point body, which is honestly kind of insane. Obviously, it's really only good in like a dedicated Blue Eyes strategy, unless you want to try to summon it off seal just to get like access to its protection, but you know, with the Bestial cards, maybe some sort of Dragon Link deck with Blue Eyes isn't too bad and might actually just be able to use this card. I'm kind of assuming that this is the case, as Jet Dragon has gone up over the last few months. This card was only $10 each, but now we're seeing the card actually moving up at the $20 to $25 range. Definitely a really awesome card if you want to play a fun, more casual deck, which I think a lot of players naturally turn to in these like tier 0 formats where they don't want to be forced to play the best deck of the format. As a relatively new secret rare, this card probably also will not be reprinted until the 2023 Megatons. There is one last card for us to touch on briefly. It is Odd Eyes Arc Pendulum Dragon. This card is a vanilla pendulum monster that is a scale 8, not a bad high skill to have. Its scale effect is really solid. If an Odd Eyes card that you control is destroyed, you can special summon an Odd Eyes monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So Triff showcased some Odd Eyes combos over on his channel a couple of weeks ago, and they're actually really cool. Basically, this is a card that you search off of Odd Eyes Revolution Dragon, and you can use Odd Eyes Seer to proc the Arc Pendulum Dragon in your scale to summon an Odd Eyes Dissolver from your deck, who can then go into Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. Super interesting combo that I never would have thought of, but I guess that's why Triff is the Pendulum God. Anyways, Arc Pendulum Dragon only has one ultra rare printing from the legendary Dragon decks, so even though it was guaranteed in that product, you had to pay a significant amount to try to open it and grab the card, so it's a lot easier for people to just go and buy the single, which a lot of people have done, causing the price to go up. This card was down at around like $4 or $5, maybe $6, because it did just have the one printing, and a lot of people were interested in pendulums and Odd Eyes, but the card is now $12 to $13. Fortunately, this card is just a one of though. Personally, I think this card should have been reprinted in Battles of Legend Crystal Revenge, since Konami did decide to reprint a bunch of other Odd Eyes cards that needed reprints in that set. It kind of would have just all fit together. But for now, fortunately, this card is just a one of. It's definitely possible that we'll see this card reprinted in something like an OTS tournament pack, just like how we saw Dissolver get reprinted really randomly. But for now, if you want to play Pendulums, you're going to have to pay up a little bit for a copy of this card. Alright everyone, that is it for today's video. I feel like we've done a lot of talking about the Dark World stuff recently. I guess it's just kind of weird because we have just like the one new product in December and we're in a tier 0 format, so everyone's attention is basically just on Dark Worlds. But hopefully we'll get some cool stuff and some cool changes soon. I think that during the holidays, people don't really play Yu-Gi-Oh as much anyways. It's more about like spending that time with your family. Anyways, guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure that you let me know by slamming that thumbs up button for me. Also, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think about the cards that we talked about today, and also let me know what other cards are trending on the market so that I can potentially cover them in future episodes. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.